Great. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We are joined by both Brendan Gallagher and Karen Rodgers from AtkinRealis. Today's session is the last of 3 on social value. We're going to be looking at reporting and best practice. Just letting people in as we go along. So to walk through the agenda today, this is 1 of 3. We're joined with Karen and Brendan, and today's objective is looking at social value reporting. You know, what happens after you do a project and you want to record the impact that it's had, but also looking at best practice across GB and Northern Ireland. We're joined by Karen and Brendan. I'm really excited to hear from them today. And then we'll also again hear about BITC's opportunities within membership and also within advisory. So I know that we're joined by a few member organizations today. We're just going to be hearing about what BITC is for those who may not be familiar with it. This is the 3rd of a speaker series. The first webinar was on the 21st, and we looked at what social value is, what's important. If you were not present for the sessions 1 and 2, you can send me an email and we can share the slides and recording, so that's available as well. The second session was on application support, and also we heard from a member version 1 on their experience with social value. We were joined by Belfast City Council and SIB in sessions 1 and 2, and heard a lot of really good information, and are now in the last session on, you know, what happens next and what are the next steps and how does reporting work. So I'm just going to pass over to Karen and Brendan.
Great, thank you, Greta, and good morning, everyone. My name is Brendan Gallagher. I'm calling from AtkinRealis myself, and Karen, for the next 30 minutes, we'll be taking you through our interpretation of measuring social value and the impact that it can potentially have on organisations and your relationship with your suppliers as well. So suppose before we get started, this is probably the most, from a Northern Ireland point of view, measuring social value is probably the area that's probably least well trodden, if you like, in Northern Ireland. We do know that obviously with social value being around in GB for around the last 10 years, the measuring of social value is a lot more mature and sophisticated, if you like, in terms of how organisations and contracting authorities are actually measuring the social value. Here in Northern Ireland, as I said, it's got a wee bit way to go. So what we hope to do this morning is share some of the learnings that we've had from our colleagues who work across England, Scotland and Wales, and the benefits they're seeing now from measuring their social value activity moving forward. So that's what this morning's session will be on, and hopefully it creates some thoughts and maybe hopefully answer some questions as well. We'll do our best to ensure that the information we're giving you this morning is directly to PPN 0121 and how that's being managed moving. Okay, Karen, next slide there, Karen.
You see, are my slides moving okay?
No, we're still on the first one there, the home slide.
Just going to stop sharing and reshare. Bear with me a second.
No worries. So suppose the next 2 slides are just myself and Karen really introducing ourselves. So I'll make a start by Karen's moving the slide forward. So my name is Brendan Gallagher. I'm the social value manager working with AtkinRealis. Mainly we work across the Northern Ireland region, but we do now work with clients in the Republic of Ireland, and we support our colleagues in the Scotland region as well. So it's quite a large portfolio, and I say there's really good learnings, particularly from Scotland, that we're able to share with our colleagues, with our clients in Northern Ireland, and as we move into the Republic of Ireland as well, what we're actually doing. I've been working in the construction regeneration sector for around the last 20 years. I've worked on major, complex, high-profile projects, really in a communications, community engagement, stakeholder management role. From my own point of view, I feel I've been delivering social value for that period of time anyway. I was always working, ensuring that the communities that were impacted by the delivery of those contracts and those projects. We felt that we were doing our best through suppliers and the organisation themselves to ensure that communities benefited from the delivery and the investment of those areas. So I felt, without having the label of social value, I felt I've been doing social value for a number of years. I have worked in projects in London where social value has been an obligation from contracting authorities and local authorities, where it has been required to be delivered on contracts that I've also worked on. So coming back to Northern Ireland, I worked on at the time was the Belfast Transport Hub, which is now known as Belfast Grand Central Station, and the Weavers Cross project, where I was head of engagement and communications on that major project, working with inner city communities around Belfast and the wider Northern Ireland, if you like, as well. So quite complex projects. We did embed a social value strategy for the delivery of that project. Obviously, it was a very high profile, large budget contract, where it was being, if you've been around Belfast, you'll see that the station now is actually growing at speed. It had major benefits to offer local communities, not just through the pre-construction phases and the construction phases, but once that facility becomes operational through bus and rail, it will generate years of opportunities for people from the surrounding areas and from the greater Belfast area as well. So it was a really pivotal project to instill social value into the long-term life cycle of the project. I did spend some time with the Strategic Investment Board. I did work with the Social Value Unit at the later stages of the policy. My role was to support the team really rolling out the Social Value Policy PPN 01 to the contracting authorities from a training point of view, to ensure the contracting authorities who were procuring social value were knowledgeable, familiar with the policy before it became mandatory to score social value in that. So a good mix of project and policy experience before leading me to my current role with AtkinRealis. What I do with AtkinRealis at the moment is we support our public sector clients in the management of social value in their contracts. We provide that life cycle from the community engagement phase around contract conception through embedding social value into the procurement process, going through the evaluation of that and the scoring, and then actually moving into the managing and the monitoring and reporting of social value. So a good breadth of knowledge there right across the sector. So hopefully today that'll be some use to you guys as you try to pick up some of the measuring aspect of them. I'm going to pass you across to Karen, who'll give you a quick introduction, and then we'll get into the presentation proper.
Okay, morning. Yes, like Brendan, I have kind of been working in this field for a number of years. Prior to joining AtkinRealis, I worked for a contractor, delivering social value in wider GB, and also then delivering the bi-social outcomes across kind of major infrastructure projects here in Northern Ireland. And I suppose with the introduction of the procurement note, I suppose in the build up to that, feeding in some of our learnings from GB, how we kind of reported, measured, monitored our social value activities, looking at, social return on investment figures, proxy values, and we'll chat through that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, like Brendan, kind of came from that stakeholder and comms role that evolved into social value. So have been, doing social value through that positive PR and comms piece on major projects. And then over the years, then the terminology then, changed into social value delivery. And yeah, have seen really, really good benefits and outcomes from it. And also seen really good business benefits to not just us as a contractor, but also to the contracting authorities around having kind of effective measurements in place to record the social value activity and the outcomes and positive messages that can produce. So yeah, I'll just move on to the agenda, and hopefully the slides are moving okay now.
They are, Karen, yeah.
They are, good. Okay. So today what we want to kind of cover is 18 months on. So from the introduction of the procurement note, where we feel that we're at the minute, the different stages of measuring and reporting, and how, that can be supported from both the contracting authority and from the delivery. Then the benefits internally, to the organisation, the supply chain, and also the client, and then the reporting tools. So we'll chat through kind of some of the reporting tools that are available in wider GB, and what can be done here in Northern Ireland. So I'm just going to pass over to Brenton, who'll take through the first part of the agenda.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, so when we were building this short presentation for you guys today, we obviously with the focus on the measuring and the reporting of social value, so it was important to kind of look back at the recent history of social value in terms of the context. So as Karen's alluded to there, and I'm sure everyone at this point knows on the call that social value has only been around in Northern Ireland through PPN 0121 since the 1st of June 2022. So we're only really 18 months into the policy being mandatory and being embedded through the procurement process. I'm conscious, or I'm aware there's probably some of the guys from SIB, the unit on the call today, and I'm sure that they'll agree that in the early stages, you know, in the immediate months prior to June 22 and the immediate months after, the big focus was on ensuring that the procurement note was embedded within the procurement practices. So there was a huge amount of effort working with contracting authorities to ensure they understood the different social value approaches, how it should be applied, some of the management techniques of it as well. There was a huge body of work required and delivered in that area. So the real focus on social value at that period was on the procurement aspect of it and applying the PPN to procurement practices. And, you know, while there's a huge degree of familiarity with it now and a huge degree of knowledge of social value from the procurement point of view, there is the shift now needs to focus on the management and the measuring and the monitoring of social value. That's probably where it needs to get to if we're following our colleagues in GB. But in terms of the policy, people will have their own opinion of this, of course. But from the contracting authorities that we have engaged with and are working with, we believe, and the feedback we're getting is that the social value policy has landed as smoothly as it possibly could, and that's testament to, you know, my former colleagues at SIB who did a huge amount of work to build the policy, create something that was workable, and actually layer that out or roll that out across the contracting authorities in a period of time. So that's a huge pat on everyone's back there for that policy landing as smoothly as possible. We do know now that, you know, social value is familiar, it's in the procurement processes, and it's been applied through procurement process. We now know the private sector and the suppliers are, you know, responding to the award criteria, and are now out there delivering social value. So in terms of how it's landed, it's done its job perfectly. And while the feedback is that it's landed as smooth as possible, we also believe there's a huge amount of goodwill from both the public sector side and the private sector of what this actually is and what the intended outcomes and what the benefits are to, you know, contracting authorities in terms of delivery of their corporate objectives, their ESG goals, but also how that can work for their stakeholders in terms of individuals, communities, and small businesses, how those groups I've just mentioned there can really benefit from government spend. So in terms of policy landing, yeah, it's done as probably as well as it possibly could have in terms of the procurement process and it integrating into kind of the normal aspect of public procurement now in Northern Ireland. In terms of fast forwarding to where that actually is, suppose the good benefit or the position we find ourselves in AtkinRealis, we have a number of colleagues. We have a team of around 15 social value coordinators and leads who've been delivering social value activity across England, Scotland and Wales for about the last 8 years. So while me and Karen, you know, mainly focus on Northern Ireland, we have been able to take a lot of accelerated learnings from them in terms of, you know, the journey of social value in terms of moving from procurement through delivery, and then the importance of actually measuring the impact that your activity is actually having. And I suppose that's where we need to get to, or probably the vision is for Northern Ireland. We get that space that we understand all of this great activity that we're doing, that organisations will undertake, you know, in the years, months and years ahead. What actually impact does that have on the economy, and how does that ensure that the policy is doing the job that it's intended to do? So hopefully we'll chat through some of the things we've picked up from our colleagues in those 8 years. And also, the biggest learning we've also had is that we also know that, you know, we're fully aware that individual suppliers will be bidding for their individual work. For individual contracts, there will be frameworks. we are finding that the more meaningful outcomes, the more impactful activity is through collaboration with supply chain partners, whether that may be a competitor who's going for the same work as you, but also with clients and a range of external bodies. So we're finding that the best activity is actually delivered through collaboration at a greater level as well. So hopefully some of the things we touch on later on will lend itself to that. Before we move on to the next slide, I penned a column or an article for Agenda NI back in November. We were supporting the social enterprise NI with their awards, and we were asked to provide a column or an article regarding the journey of social value through procurement to now where it needs to get to in terms of the measuring of that. So the links there, we'll share the link in the chat function, and it really chats about that move from procurement through to delivery, through to the measuring and the reporting of social value. So hopefully you find, if you take a chance to read that, hopefully you find a lot of the stuff we're chatting about today comes through in that article as well. Okay, Karen. So in terms of bringing it back to Northern Ireland, as I said, and this is kind of how we want to kind of tailor this today. Obviously, there is a requirement from the PPN of how we must monitor and report social value, and I'm assuming everyone will know that at this point or will encounter that at some point. So the PPN 0121 in section 4 and 5 outline how contracts should be managed and reported and monitored upon, in the post-award. So we do have guidance from the government that dictates how that should run. And so for this slide, I'll run through what that actually is before we move on to what is happening in GB and where maybe might give us an idea of where Northern Ireland might get to in the years ahead. So in terms of the managing, the monitoring and reporting of social value, as I said, those are clearly outlined within section 4 and 5 of the PPM 0121. And how that works in practice is when an organisation has submitted a bid or response for government work, what the contracting authority must do is submit a contract or notification of contract commencement to the social value unit who are based within the SIB. From that notification award, as an online form that can be filled in and submitted across, then the SIB team will create a unique account for that contract, and your nominated person within your organisation will receive unique login details where they can go in and see the commitments that have been committed to within the response. That's a unique account for that contract. The supplier then has obviously the freedom and flexibility to go in and update that when activity has been delivered. So that's the kind of the central reporting system, which is the social value portal. When you update that information, that's usually on a monthly or quarterly basis, or a report is required on a monthly or quarterly basis. That's kind of either agreed between a supplier and a contracting authority, or is dictated by the contracting authority in the contract documentation. So that will generate either a monthly report that'll come from the portal back to the contracting authority, and that's essentially allows the contracting authority to track if points are being delivered and when they're being delivered moving forward. So it's kind of like a reporting mechanism in there. So that's what's required from the government to your contracting authority, is that social activity, whether that's through points or through the alternative approach, is being tracked through the progress. So your contracting authority has a visible report to track how points are being delivered and when they're being delivered. What's required above and beyond that then is the ongoing management and collaboration across social value. And the role that we currently do for our clients in Northern Ireland, we're now in that role where we're managing suppliers on their social value journey. And we're finding collaboration with suppliers to deliver new activity, deliver the requirements, is a hugely important part of making sure social value is being delivered properly. If that function of management is not instilled or is not completed, suppliers will have, is there any accountability for suppliers to deliver what they said they would do? Is there any understanding of what activity is being delivered, whether it's through job creation, whether it's through in-work progression, whether it's through any of the key themes that are mentioned within the PPN. So the management of what we're doing ensures that there's an understanding between contracting authority and supplier to understand exactly what is being delivered. But by doing so, that helps a greater level of engagement, communication between contracting authority and supplier. What that generates, really good understanding of the case studies that are being developed, say if it's through job creation or environmental initiatives or promoting well-being. That really allows the suppliers to engage with the contracting authority to understand what's being delivered out there on the ground. That generates new case studies, which in turn drives standards, builds trust between the suppliers and contracting authorities. They understand what's actually being delivered out there in terms of all that activity. So that case studies then can be used internally for contracting staff, or can be used as part of external communications as well. So those case studies, and we know there's a number of great case studies already out there, really helps, break down the kind of fog or mist of what activity is being delivered, how it's impacting individuals or communities, and how contracting authorities can use that activity then as part of their corporate or social or governance obligations. I suppose the final question then is, how is that information being measured? We know it's being tracked through the portal, but how is social value, the impact of all that activity through job creation or environmental initiatives, how's that being measured? Is it being measured, and who has responsibility for doing it? Is the responsibility on the individual supplier? Is the onus on the contracting authority to measure that, or is the onus on the government to provide a central system? At the moment, we don't really know the answer to that question, but we know that there is measurement happening in GB. So at the moment, we have the tracking and reporting of social value. We have the internal management of suppliers to ensure everyone knows what they're doing. We have the emerging now or the identification of those case studies. But what does all that mean for the economy? How do we know that the activity that's being delivered is that really showcasing how effective the policy, the PPM, is in terms of doing the job that's intended to do? So hopefully we'll explore that over the next number of slides. So at this point, I'm going to pass you over to Karen.
Thanks, Brenton. Okay, so I suppose we're chatting around kind of the benefits of measuring social value, and then we'll kind of move into what's being done on GB at the minute. So I suppose when we're looking at the benefits of measuring the wider social value delivery, whether that's from a contracting authority or an organisation, it's kind of all similar. So it's through that creation of baseline data. I suppose having that provides a starting point and gives organisations the ability to track its social impact. Measuring and monitoring social value activity will support the successful application of the PPM. And we can see that through the positive outcomes that are being, generated at the minute in terms of the opportunities provided, the support given, the initiatives that are driven for the local economy. And then kind of having outcomes baselined and reviewed, what this can do is support in the delivery of corporate objectives. So using social value kind of as an enabler for supporting needs and requirements at a local level. And it also then will aid in the reporting of ESG and the effective governance processes, so that there's internal accountability for the social value delivery. So it also creates kind of positive communication content. So tracking and monitoring supports the stakeholder engagement. So sharing the outcomes with local communities, any interested parties, and it can help kind of build relationships, enhance the external reputation of the organisation. Through effective measurement and monitoring, it can be used as a gap analysis. So having it kind of laid out, you can look at the risks and opportunities across the key themes. So whether that be in employment retention, supply chain gaps, or environmental solutions, having it all kind of recorded gives you that opportunity to do that risks and opportunity analysis. It also creates kind of a social conscience. It changes the culture of an organisation. So by sharing the outcomes, the positive outcomes internally, it helps create that, social conscience within an organisation, and people want to see that. And having those, outcomes measured and shared, it improves the opportunity for talent attraction and retention of employees. So individuals want to see what an organisation is doing to support local people and the economy. And through measuring, it also gives the ability to track internally kind of training outcomes, and improves that internal mentoring rates. So there's lots of benefits coming through from measuring it at organizational level, and sharing that information across, the wider business, and also across stakeholders. And then kind of moving into the supply chain. So this is kind of key, and one of the big outcomes from the PPN is looking at, how can social outcomes be maximised with including the involvement with the supply chain. And we've seen really effective contributions with having that kind of collaboration through the supply chain, and it creates kind of new types of business partnerships, like on a different level. So having social value, as a collaboration mechanism, it supports kind of business development. So it encourages that networking and relationship building, and the creation of new opportunities. And then working together, kind of reviewing social value outcomes can address, sectoral needs. So working together with the supply chain in delivering and measuring the social value outcomes can look at where there's a need for, a talent bank or additional resources, whether that's through individuals or through additional supply chain partners. It's important to kind of sit down with the supply chain and review where there is the gaps and the needs to create further social value. And it drives kind of innovative solutions. So, even when you think about environmental, working with the supply chain, sometimes they have a different perspective on things. So recording that information and discussing it and sharing it across, project teams or within organizations helps kind of solve business problems as well, and drives that innovation piece. And through the engagement with the supply chain, it looks at, the improvement of the local economy through kind of the inclusion of, different types of supply chain, whether that be micro businesses, social enterprises, startups and entrepreneurs. So having all that kind of information logged, recorded, baselined is certainly encouraging not just organizational needs, but also it creates great benefits for the supply chain that we're all working with. So I suppose moving on from that and the recording piece, looking at reporting tools and working across kind of wider GB, there's numerous reporting platforms and measurement tools. These aren't quite built for Northern Ireland requirements, and they're very much driven, as Brenton mentioned earlier, by kind of local authorities and national public organisations. And a lot of these platforms kind of start at the procurement and the tendering stages. And quite often now what we're seeing across GB is where social value planned activities or delivery plans are added to the platform for evaluation processes and purposes. And it all is kind of driven by a financial figure, which is different to what we're trying to deliver in NI. We're trying to look at it from an outcomes based rather than a monetary, value. So I suppose looking at the platforms across GB, they're continuously evolving, and they're mainly driven by the TOMS metrics, which is the themes, outcomes, and measurements. And those metrics are kind of dictated by the UK Social Value Task Force, and it is evolving. They're kind of a decade into the Social Value Act. So they're still not quite there. There's lots of kind of emerging changes and themes coming through, which is needed and required around kind of just having that adaptability around social value. But looking at the platforms that are out there, they're kind of based on regional statistics within GB. So based on, their demographics, GDPR or GDP, and inflation figures. There's lots of statistics built into the background of those, what we talk about proxy values. And those proxy values are quite different to the outcomes based because it's all a monetary figure. So we often get compared within NI, around social return on investment figures, and there's lots of organisations, I suppose, circulating and populating what their social return on investment figure is, and that will vary depending on the region. And if you look at kind of some of the statistics coming out, that is based, a high proportion of that social return on investment figure comes from local spend and local employment, and that is all dependent on the radius set by the contracting authority. And if we think of Northern Ireland, it's all local, it's all local employment, it's all local economy, it's all, local spend. So what is being delivered in GB isn't necessarily transferable to ANI in terms of that social return on investment figure. I suppose it's just important, and we're all kind of in ANI at the start of this journey, and there's really, really good positive outcomes coming out of social value delivery. And in an idealism, yes, it would be great to have, and we're still early on the journey, to have kind of a generic tool that could drive that consistent kind of measurement across NI. And it's quite difficult to compare ourselves to some of the statistics coming out of GB, and that does vary a lot in terms of that proxy value versus outcome based that we're working on at the minute. So just lots of platforms, lots of people having conversations, and I suppose when we're talking to individuals and organizations, ideally we would love to have a generic tool that's tailored for NI, that kind of measures that impact long term, from what we're all delivering around the social value themes. So just going to pass back to Brendan now to kind of talk around kind of the importance of sharing the successes.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And as Karen said there, that there's numerous amount of products out there now in terms of measuring social value and social impact. What we do as an organisation, we do use one. We have a subscription license to doing that, but we kind of took a conscious decision today not to promote that particular brand. We didn't want to promote it over any other particular brand, because we could have shared half a dozen, 10, maybe more different brands who are out there doing in this space. So I think the onus is on every organisation to do their own research and select which service or which provider, that if you want to go down this road, that you want to select yourself. That there is a number. The one we use, we see the huge benefit of doing that. And suppose from an AtkinRealis point of view, we work on numerous contracts, numerous frameworks that are in their tens and hundreds of millions of pounds. So our social value activity has a real impact on the regions and locations that Karen's alluded to there. So really what using the measurement tool allows us to do, when AtkinRealis employ people on contracts or use social enterprises or small businesses, we can actually see the social value impact that we're having on a particular council area or a region through a combined amount of activity moving forward. So I suppose what we're saying here is, by the measuring of social value activity from an organisation, all being created together and collected together, as a society and as an economy, we can really try to understand how effective our activity is to the success of the PPN 0121, and actually understanding the impact that all our activity collectively is having on individuals, communities and small businesses, and really showcasing. That was really the big learning from the social value policy in GB from 2012 to 2018. They were really unsure how much impact the policy was actually having before the introduction of the TOMs in 2018, the themes and outcomes and measures. That TOMs framework and the measuring of those proxy values is now allowing the Cabinet Office in GB to understand how impactful their social value procurement and policy is having on wider society. That's maybe a place that we need to get to. And I'm sure SAB are working with the Department for Finance or CPD on the early kind of trends of social value in Northern Ireland, in terms of employment, environment initiatives. So there is a huge way to go here in terms of Northern Ireland and in terms of how we measure. But by understanding all that activity being measured in terms of economic values, environmental reductions or social impact, we'll really get to understand how effective the PPN 0121 has actually been. We know it's been hugely impactful in the procurement process, but how that translates to the social, economic and environmental benefits is a journey that we also need to go on. But what we have learned from our colleagues is, when organizations work together, collaborate, share best practice, it does drive standards. It does drive more collaborative activity. It has more meaningful impact. It has more legacy, if you like, in terms of long term as opposed to short term initiatives. Creating visibility of those activities and their contribution to society really drives people to be inspired to deliver more. That's what we've found. We've got a really engaged, enthusiastic set of colleagues in GB who know the work that they do has a huge impact on individuals' lives and on communities through the work that they do. They're more than happy to work with our competitors, if you like, in this space, to work together to pool resources, pool knowledge, to share knowledge, to create new activity. So we're finding that the measurement really enhances activity and creates better outcomes for the people, obviously the policies intended to work towards. And again, kind of going back to the final point, through the procurement encourages delivery of social activity, which is great. In Northern Ireland, we know that everyone's moving towards their points targets in the majority of cases. But what do those points actually mean? What is the economic value that social value is having for, different parts of Northern Ireland? Is the government investment that's coming down through the programme for government, down through government departments, is it trickling into different parts of the region which might necessarily avail of government money? Is it getting into smaller businesses to give them a foot up in terms of getting into the supply chains or into the sector? Or is it helping individuals getting into employment? Is it getting them into, inspiring them into, into new business as well? Hopefully in the next year or so, we'll have a better idea of those trends. But we're certainly, of the opinion, working with our colleagues in GB, that a massive aspect of this, above and beyond just the procurement aspect of it, the delivery of activity is actually understanding how that activity translates to impactful under the economy, and by to do that is only through the measuring of that as well. So probably the key message that we're projecting here today is that there's still a long way to go in terms of the measurement here in Northern Ireland. So we'll continue to work with colleagues and SIB to kind of see how we can support and move into a more consistency in terms of measuring social activity. Okay, Greta, I know we want to pass back to you before we go to the Q&A. So back to yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Thanks, Karen. It's really good to hear about what's coming up with social value and best practice in GB. I'm just going to share my screen again and walk through the last slides with BITC before we head into question and answer. So I know that there are a lot of BITC members on this call, but just to give a little bit of an idea of who BITC is and what we do to those who are not or who will be looking at these slides afterwards, and we're not able to make it here today. And so I know that there's quite a lot of alignment with the work that we already do. So when you think about social value, perspective, it's about delivering zero carbon, addressing employability and skills, and looking at well-being of employees and communities. So Business in the Community has been doing similar work already for over 30 years. We call it responsible business, and we are the only network for responsible business in Northern Ireland. We have over 260 members. A lot of the Northern Ireland's leading companies are part of the network, and our members actually employ more than 40% of the working population. So when we are able to bring more awareness towards responsible business or social value to even a small part of our network, we are really happy to see that there are positive impacts to the employees and even more out towards society and their greater network. So we're really excited to see the increasing interest in social value, both within contracting authorities, but also just generally from organizations as well. So when we specifically, Business and Community, talk about responsible business, we talk about it with the 3 Ps. Purpose is a general overall framework. So people, planet, and place. And we can help organizations by understanding their environmental impact, whether that's through Scope 1 and Scope 2, and mapping their supply chain impacts as well, or even reviewing environmental policies, for example, helping them meet ISO 14001, and even thinking about, you are doing something that's positive for the environment, how can you enhance that and share that with other organizations as well? In place, we're thinking about, how an organization links with the community that it works in. What does community mean to a specific organization, and how do they classify that? But also, how do you engage with the community in a way that makes sense specifically for that community and their needs, and not only in a way that the business would want, for example. And then finally, when we think about people, we can help you work out how to be responsible towards your current workforce, but also your future workforce. For your current workforce, it's about ensuring diversity, healthy and inclusive workplaces. And then for your future workforce is, how do we reach out to those that are furthest removed from the workplace and helping them find their way back to the world of work in some shape or form. So we have teams of people that work around the different P's, and they're always looking at issues that are coming up or things that we see organizations not doing as much as they could be. And then we figure out, why is this important? How can we help organizations actually take actions? So we create initiatives, campaigns, and programs, workshop to help organizations understand the issues and then feel confident to take the next steps. So just going through the P's, I'm going to give an idea of the interventions that we do underneath each. We have around 50 to 60 organizations within all three, and also show how these could be relevant towards social value requirements. So within people, we talk about employee well-being and inclusion. We can help your organization write well-being policies, what specific well-being is important to your employees, what are most relevant to them and their families and their community, and what you should be doing about that. How do you go along writing policy, for example? We also do training, so bespoke well-being training, any exercise programs, and mental health. We have a fantastic chair yoga program that regularly gets 400 to 500 signups from our members, which is a fantastic program. And then lastly, also, we do a lot of work around inclusivity. We can help you map out your workforce diversity breakdown, for example, whether that's through age, race, sexuality, and any other type of inclusivity that's relevant to you and your workforce. And then also helping you understand how to engage them, which is a really important one as well. And in place, this is quite a large area of work at BITC. So under a social value lens, this is where I work with employability and brokering links with VCSEs sit. We deliver a lot of education programs in NI. We work with over 100 primary schools and post-primary schools, including with employee volunteering opportunities. So we help people and kids, even volunteers as well, develop confidence, literacy, numeracy, digital, and any other transferable soft skills that are helpful for the workplace. And we also do volunteering opportunities both in online and remotely. Most importantly, we've been connecting businesses with charities, community groups, schools, and other institutions for over 30 years. So we have great contacts with communities in Northern Ireland and have done brokering work as well. We can also work specifically on creating bespoke volunteering opportunities. So if you've not acknowledged a specific community issue that you want to address, we can work with you and work with the right organizations to help you deliver that. And then also we can help support your training and employability targets through existing employability programs, where I just mentioned before, engaging those that are farthest removed from the workplace, and also working with other charities that deliver employability support programs across the Northern Ireland. And then lastly, going into planet, this is quite more straightforward. We can help with measuring your environmental impact, including creating a plan towards net zero. We do a lot of carbon literacy training and environmental awareness and biodiversity work, also working with the Ulster Wildlife to boost biodiversity, but also creating site programs specifically for you. And just this year, our environmental benchmarking survey has hit 25 years, which was a fantastic achievement. But most recently, we have been developing more specific social value support. So one is, just talking to us and figuring out how do you maximize your existing membership, because the initiatives just mentioned before were those that can fit within your membership already. And if there is anything more bespoke that you would want, we do offer mentoring workshops. So, you mapping out your existing activities of social value, there might be something that you don't necessarily think or know, but may already fit within that. Helping you work through, identifying the social impact that you want to address, engaging with communities to figuring that out, engaging your workforce to figuring out what's most important, and then finally also designing social value projects. So you have a requirement, let's work through it. What do you need to deliver it? And then also helping you find the right people to deliver the project with. So there's quite a lot that already fits within the membership. There's quite a lot that we can also do more bespokely with advisory. So I'm just gonna head off to question and answer, and we'll stop sharing my screen and then open the floor to anyone who would want to ask a question. This can be through chat or through speaking up if you'd want to. So if we're not going to have any questions, I do have a question for both Brendan and Karen. Where do you hope Northern Irish social value reporting gets to next year?
Next year, where I hope it gets to, I suppose it goes back to the conversations we've had with our colleagues now. So suppose the way the award criteria is kind of worded here, the model text, it asks suppliers to chat about reporting and the monitoring of their activity, and as I said, that comes through the social value portal. What we're seeing from social value questions that our colleagues are working on, it's really contracting authorities and local authorities are asking organisations now to demonstrate their impact that they are having through their social value activity, and that's really where the measurement comes in. So there's a business need now for organisations to measure the activity that they're having through activity. So it really depends next year on contracting authorities, local authorities, to what questions that they actually answer in their tenders. If they continue with the monitoring and reporting question, it may not advance as quickly as it may need. If it ever gets to, contracting authorities asking their suppliers to how they will measure their activity, that may create that kind of catalyst for organisations to shift to more to how it's being measured. But suppose the big thing for me would be, whenever we're having these conversations, and I'm completely aware that we were exposed to international conversations that are going on, that there's an inconsistency of measurement, through region to region, through software, is that there's a frustration there that how people measure their activity, whether it's social, economic, or environmental, is completely different from organisation to organisation, from contracting authority to contracting authority. So what I would hope for would be that the Northern Ireland government would come out and have a consistent approach to this, so that everyone on this call and everyone who's not on this call, everyone's measuring under the same metrics, so we're not having a kind of disparity between what one organisation is doing as compared to another. So like the way the policy was consistent in terms of its themes and a shared understanding, I would hope that the measuring of social activity would follow the same approach, that the government would provide a level of consistency, and that would allow us all to understand how successful our activities are to the success of the PPN. Is essentially ultimately what we want to try and get to. So hopefully next year there's a move towards, and of course that comes from, is there a government, is there funding to do something like that? So there's a lot of questions that we need to ask. So hopefully we get a government in place early new year, who then can provide a guidance of how we are all supposed to measure this, to understand the activity that we're doing, is it benefiting individuals, communities, and small businesses across Northern Ireland.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I think just being prepared for what comes next and being prepared for measuring seems to be the key point here. Since there's no other questions for today's webinar, I will leave 8 minutes back for everyone, and then we'll be sharing the slides and the recording later on this week. So I want to give a big thank you to both Karen and Brandon for your time today, sharing your valuable insights, and then thanks everyone for joining us in the speaker series.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
See ya.